The Art of Adventure. This is episode 231 with David Nihill. The Art of Adventure is the podcast that helps you travel the world, run your business, and embark on an epic quest. I'm your host, lead explorer, and guide, Derek Loudermilk. Don't forget to check out my latest book, Superconductors. There's a chapter in there about storytelling and how you can harness storytelling in your career. And one of the early reviewers of Superconductors read that chapter and recommended that I have today's guest, David Nihill, on the show. So it's a great pairing to check out Superconductors and then have a listen to this episode, or have a listen to this episode and then go get the book. So today's guest, David Nihill, is going to teach us how to be funny. He's the author of Do You Talk Funny and the creator of the Funny Biz Conference, and he's a public speaker and a speaking coach, and he did a lot of work to distill down the secrets of comedians for use in public speaking and presentations. And he found that in TED Talks, the most popular TED Talks, they're actually just as funny, laughs per minute, as some of the funniest movies that are out there. So humor is a really important skill. It helps you connect better with people. It helps people learn better, and it helps people remember your message. So even if you're not a professional speaker, using humor anytime you want to connect with people or persuade people, this includes your friends and family and kids. But if you're doing Facebook videos or you're writing emails or having conversations, learning some of the basic principles of humor is going to be really helpful. So today we're going to learn some of the techniques that comedians use, and humor is a learnable skill. It's something you can practice and get better in. So that's a great place to start. But what are some of those ways that we can practice? So we'll be thinking about how we can connect with your audience, how to structure your message, how to jump right in the action, how to set up frameworks that are rigid enough that you stay on track, but loose enough to let you improvise if you like that, and make it seem natural. And David is one of those people who still, even though he's a public speaker, is not completely comfortable with it. He doesn't really love it, but he knows, based on all of these techniques, that he is going to deliver a good talk. He knows that it's going to go well. And so it's great to have him being our guide to public speaking and being funny, because he's not a natural. So he's really good at breaking it down. Because he had to learn it for himself. So without further ado, here is David Nihill. David Nihill, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me.
And first, do you consider yourself to be a rule breaker?
Yeah, good question. I think if you ask every teacher I've ever had, they will say yes. I think all Irish people are rule breakers. We come over here and just get permanently confused by the amount of rules you have in America. Like, who made a rule for that? Yes, I break rules on a daily basis.
And
I just today, yesterday, I was actually mountain biking, and nobody told me the rule of when you're going downhill, you do not have the right of way. I assumed, using nothing but logic and gravity, that if I was a big person on a mountain bike on a single track moving down at high speed, that surely I would have the right of way. But no, it turns out I don't. And I slammed into some guy at 25 miles an hour who just then started to give out to me. And my hand got kind of mangled in between the crossbar on his bike, and I couldn't move it. And he was just shouting the rules at me all the time. And weirdly enough, my hand got stuck basically right between his legs on his Lycra shorts. And it was the most uncomfortable thing. As blood was dripping out of me, and my hand is basically unwillingly on his private parts, he just keeps telling me how I'm breaking the rules. So yeah, that's the very long answer to that question. Yes, I apparently am a rule breaker.
Wow. And I guess that question just came to me because we're going to be talking about public speaking, and do you consider yourself a public speaker or a comedian, or what do you actually sort of do?
I think public speaker is a massively BS title. Like, when you think about it, if I put like keynote speaker on my bio, I would be very ashamed of myself in life. I'd be like, how did you come up with that title? Because I think everybody is a public speaker. Everybody does some element of speaking on behalf of their job. So it's kind of hard to differentiate who is and who isn't. So yeah, I've never put that title on myself, but I've also tried to shy away from the title of comedian a little bit, because sometimes once you get labeled that, it's a bit hard to sell back into the world of business unless you're selling them some form of entertaining content that you're suddenly the star of. But they tend to be, the fact that I've gone to business school and you have a master's degree and you worked for some of the world's top companies and you've been doing everything from M&A to being a marketing consultant to doing whatever it may be, magically disappears with the word comedian sometimes, which I think is a little bit sad in the world of business, but I've certainly found that.
Well, so I think you're trying, faking being the comedian Irish Dave for a year is it's sort of like there's maybe an unwritten rule. And I guess that's where that question comes from, that you just decided to break for yourself. But I'm really curious about that experience of going around being a comedian, even though you weren't sort of labeling yourself as a comedian before that.
Yeah, and to be honest, I still don't. And I don't think I'm the only person in the world of entrepreneurship that does that. Like, there's a lot of sneaky, really talented, high-level speakers in the world of business at the moment that just happen to be doing stand-up comedy on the side and not telling anybody about it. I mean, as far as I know, James Altucher has gone as far as to partner up with a comedy club in New York for the most part, so he's getting on stage there. Dory Clark, who'd be very big in the world of entrepreneurship, is on the side doing stand-up comedy. And there's a lot of ones like John Acuff, who you'll talk to, will tell you they exclusively study stand-up comedians to influence their public speaking. And he's not alone in that. Gary Vaynerchuk very much cites that he's only ever studied 3 people for public speaking: Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, and Chris Rock. And they're not the kind of connections you'd normally make. But once you start looking at a business world and some of the best speakers, you very clearly and quickly see a correlation with the world of stand-up comedy. So I never really leaned on any either or description, but I was definitely doing stand-up comedy. And I mean, I definitely still do it. I just don't announce when I'm doing it, but it's kind of the perfect practice ground for the world of public speaking or business speaking, because you just clock up that time. The stakes are much higher in the audience feedback, but they're a lot more insignificant on the impact on your business career. So it's kind of a moment between you and an audience that usually isn't being video recorded in any way, where the stakes aren't as high as if you're all of a sudden doing a TED Talk and that's going to be published and that's going to tell your life story. It's much easier to get reactions out of a business crowd or a TED Talk crowd than it would be a comedy club. So once you're comfortable with one, the other one, which would have been a very uncomfortable scenario, all of a sudden becomes a very comfortable one, because there's nothing worse than stand-up comedy.
Is that a new trend that all of a sudden business leaders are realizing to tap into?
Yeah, well, I think we've always been aware of, if you go on after somebody who crushes it and makes everybody laugh and you're the next speaker, you become very aware that that's something you need to work on. And these days, with the shorter attention spans and TED Talks being, they're selling themselves technology, entertainment, and design. And they, by default, started bringing lots of comedians in to give TED Talks to fulfill that portion of their sale, right? The entertainment side. And all of a sudden, all the world's leading business talks, they actually have one thing in common. All the world's leading TED Talks, they're all funny. Every single one of the top TED Talks is funny. If you look at the top 10 at the moment, they make people laugh on average the same amount of times as some of the world's funniest movies. So it's pretty nuts. Like, if you watch someone like Seth Godin, they will make you laugh on average about 3 times a minute, which is the same as the movie The Hangover, if you analyze it on a laughs per minute basis. Now, those laughs aren't as big, but people are getting used to receiving information with a level of entertainment, and they feel the pressure to be entertained. Imagine you have an event and you invite like 20,000 people and it's your company, and you go out on stage and you're launching a product and you're going to be up there for 45 minutes. And you have speakers like Seth Godin on the same event, or Gary Vaynerchuk, or Mason Zaid, some of these TED speakers that are amazing, and all of a sudden you're next. You feel the pressure to be funny because they've just got used to the crowd used to being funny, used to laughing, used to enjoying it. So I think, you're seeing more and more people realizing to grab people's attention these days that they're expected to be somewhat entertaining.
And it seems like what you're saying is that it's we can craft humor into our talks, even if we're sort of don't consider ourselves to be funny people in our day-to-day lives. Is it true that so can everybody be funny, first of all?
Yeah, I think definitely on stage because it's a limited period of time. And if you're a little bit weird or quirky, or sometimes your humor can go a little bit sideways, it's easier to do that on a short form basis by looking at certain techniques and replicating that. So 100% of anybody I've ever met can make themselves considerably funnier in a short period of time. Overall, in your life, it's more a question of certain techniques to become aware of. But I think anyone who studies a comedian in their first or second year of comedy and sees that same comedian 7 years later will realize something pretty quickly, that they might not be famous for being funny, but they're considerably funnier than they were. And so I think that really proves that humor is a skill. And if you believe it's a skill, then it can be obviously studied, worked on, and improved upon. And if it's a skill, there must be certain techniques behind it. And if you know those techniques, all of a sudden you tend to look funnier a lot faster. So I have a business where we're ghostwriting speeches for people, and we actually analyze the metrics of their talk. So we take a loose version of their talk delivered on a live audience. I record all the metrics so I can tell you, hey, this particular person, this particular company CEO made people laugh about 9 times in a 50-minute talk. And by the time we're done punching it up, that can increase to 50. And that would not be uncommon that we would add about 5 times to laugh, usually about 3 times to laugh on average, but sometimes up to a multiple of 5. So like, what made them funny so quickly? We're using their same words for the most part. We're just reworking their content and saying a different way and deliberately adding certain techniques that comedians know backwards that the world of business usually does not.
And is this something, if you take a CEO's talk and punch it up, do they have to work on their delivery to learn how to deliver this in a funny way, or they can just go through it like they normally would and all of a sudden they're funnier?
That's the funny thing. Honestly, it's a bit of an annoying or a source of annoyance for me when I go into companies and they've been trained in public speaking before, and the people who train them are people who've been trained to train them in public speaking, and they're talking about moving your hands and holding eye contact for 3 seconds. Most of that stuff nearly becomes irrelevant. It's kind of rubbish content delivered beautifully is still rubbish. So if you're really working on the delivery as opposed to crafting the content, usually you're going to freak people out more than anything else because you look really ungenuine to be emphasizing your body's behavior as you're simply saying words. So if you go into a comedy club and you study a comedian, you'll see them stand there with their hands in their pockets, their arms folded, all big no-nos in the world of public speaking coaches. But for a comedian, they know that, or any performer, they usually know that what they're saying is more important than how they say it. Now, if you write it in a certain way, you can create the pauses that makes your delivery look really good. So if you know what the key funny word is a sentence is, and you know the point when you're telling a story where your friends normally always laugh, you then need to rework that so that the funny key word is delayed until the maximum end of the piece. And that's what gives your audience their time to laugh. And that's what maximizes your chances of looking like you have good timing and delivery. So there's one in the world of entrepreneurship. I like John Acuff a lot as a speaker. He's one of the funniest speakers you'll see. He's a 4 or 5 time New York Times bestseller. And he has a short little story where he's like, my daughter really wanted to get a cat. And we told her, we can't get a cat because your mom is allergic. And then his daughter said, well, we can get a cat when mom is dead. And like everybody laughs. Dead is the key word. So dead is that gives the meaning to the story and is the surprise element. That word has to be last. And by putting that last, as a comedian would do, he told me he watches 100 comedians for every business speaker he's ever seen. And he is at business events a lot. So he's very conscious of those techniques. The keyword goes last, your timing look good, your delivery becomes not as significant as the words you're saying.
Wow, okay, and that was pretty funny.
It's a lot to throw on someone, but once you realize that actually this is content and I need to structure the content in a certain way, then the delivery just follows along. But like you're facilitating the laughter and you're delivering information in a way that people are most likely to laugh. So then what you're doing with your hands or your weird eye contact or any of those things people tend to focus on when you hire corporate people to come in and train your public speaking, they're kind of like, they nearly appear silly.
When you get one of these talks from a CEO, what is the first thing you look to change about them? The order of the words there?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes they say things that are not relatable to the audience. So like the number one thing when you're looking at a talk is to question what you're saying and go, what will people think when I say this? So sometimes the CEO will be like, oh, on my commute to work, I was flying back by jet from Palo Alto to Arizona every Friday. And everybody who listens to that statement who isn't a big rich CEO will go, you're a bit of a knobhead. Like, I don't really like you, because it's not relatable. I'm not going to work in a jet. You can't say that. So you're usually picking it apart initially for inconsistencies, things that might turn the audience against them in any way. Sadly, public speaking is a little bit, especially at the start, a popularity contest, and one you need to win and one you need to make relatable, because usually, no matter how good your story, nobody cares about your story. They care about seeing themselves in your story. So if you're talking about your mother, you need to tell it in a way that allows me to picture my mother, and I become invested in the story. And sometimes it's just about setting them up so that everybody's on board and everybody's on listening, and they're not saying anything that might freak people out early on.
So I do a little bit of speaking, and you mentioned to me that you were just on a book tour. I've got a book that's coming out, or it just came out, and I'm having a book launch party, and I'll be doing some corporate talks about it and various workshops. And one of the parts that I struggle with is how to sort of that relatable piece, that sort of why I wrote this book, or my own origin story, to lead into the material that I want to be getting across. So what are some good ways to think about building that relatability or having people see them in our story?
Yeah, I think usually one, start wide. So, I mean, if you're doing a book about quitting your job, being a digital nomad and traveling around the world seeking adventure, you're really trying to tap a generic statement sometimes that allows everyone to relate to you. So if you're like, I did this and I had this job and I went there, is not as relatable to a generic opening statement. It's like many times in our life, we just feel like something is missing. And just letting them sit on that for a second, because everybody will just nod their head in agreement, and then you get to tell them about what was missing in your life. So something as simple as that allows it to be relatable before you start giving a kind of chronological order to your own life. And if you know your story backwards and sideways when you're speaking on the book tour and for a workshop, usually I think the best thing you can ever do is start right in the action of that story. So things are going, you're in some scenario further down the road that doesn't quite follow the timeline, and try and bring it back to that at the end with all the content you want to deliver in the middle. And they're usually the best talks. What they're doing, it's a bit like CSI. You remember that TV show? You just turn it on, sure, and like you've only turned it on for 6 seconds and something exploded and 12 people are dead, and you're like, whoa, what's going on here? And then they fill back in the details. So they grab your attention. They don't follow a chronological timeline, and they start in the action and then fill everything at the end so that the start always connects to the end. And I think that's something that's missing in a lot of people's talks, and natural conclusion. So the audience goes, oh, it's about to be over. And usually you have to do a couple of things to do that. Start with the wide generic opening, get into the action as soon as you can. And then as you get towards the end, you need 1 or 2 or usually 3 at most callback references to things within the talk that you and the audience have kind of laughed at. So if there was 3 key quirky bits from your talk, what are they? And hit them in the kind of closing paragraph before you get to the end. And now people know that the end is coming. So they just feel a lot better about the whole experience when they leave. Because there's not like, you'll have seen a talk before where the speaker goes, oh, no, that's about it, really. That's kind of most I think I wanted to say. And I think that covers kind of most things. And then they just off they go. And you're like, well, that was amazing. Not quite. So it's just making sure you take your content and try and structure everything within a book-ended story, which is a technique, obviously, you're probably very familiar with as a writer, where they try and bring everything together at the end and reference, call back to key things within the story, and then bring it right back to the start, explain how that happened, and leave them with some key message.
So for a CEO or anybody that has a call to action, like if it's like announcing this new product and like go buy it, or if someone on stage is offering to sell their next, I don't know, retreat or course or whatever, how does that fit in with sort of wrapping up the story? And also, like, what about Q&A? Like, how does that all sequence?
Yeah, so it's a good question. If you're promoting something, be sneaky about it. So, like, I will want to promote my book, but at no time will I tell them to buy the book. But if I have a slide with my contact details on there, there's going to be a picture of my book on there. I'll say, hey, if you have any questions, and that will not be at the end. It'll be 2 or 3 slides from the end. I will never finish on Q&A because that leaves you feeling like a bit of a banana a lot of the time, and you can't control that. So I like to put it as it's like U2 going around the world with a new album and getting to the very last gig of a packed out tour and having 10 songs on a new album and playing Madison Square Garden and the crowd is going absolutely bananas. They've played 9 songs out of 10. It's exactly where they want it to be. And then they just stop and go to the crowd. Oh, do any of you play an instrument? Does anyone want to bring this home? That would be insane. Like, your favorite band would never do that. You shouldn't do it either. So there's a sentence that allows you to change everything in public speaking where all you have to say is, I'm going to take a few questions before I make my conclusion. And that forces you to keep a conclusion slide, which will usually have no more than 3 key takeaways, which are linked to the lessons and not the things you're promoting, because you want to put in the thing you're promoting just before you take the questions. But by telling them, I'm going to take a few questions before I make my conclusion, if nobody has any questions, no problem. It's finished. And usually by saying, I have more content to come, people in the room will not give much tolerance to anyone who has a really long-winded question. So those ones where they give you a life story, like about their emotional state of mind, instead of a specific question that happen most speakers, they don't tend to come. It always happens where like, well, I work in an office and John's like really weird on Tuesdays and he keeps taking my pancakes from the fridge and emotionally, I don't know what to do, but I think I can link it back to my mother. I've been talking to my therapist at the moment. You're like, hey, wait a minute. What has that got to do? That is not a question. But the other people in the audience tend to dead stare that person when you say, I'm going to take a few questions before I make my conclusion, because you're basically saying, I need this to be brief because there's more coming. And that helps you do. And if you want it to be long, or if someone goes long-winded, you can always say, hey, listen, I'm not going anywhere. Hang around after. Feel free to chat to me. But yeah, we'll get to that later on. But yeah, as long as you control the ending, because you really do need to. So be sneaky about the promotional stuff. Don't finish on Q&A and make sure that you control how it ends.
Brilliant. Okay, cool.
That makes a big difference when you're on book tour, because otherwise you're going to look like a bit of a banana when they're like, any questions for our speaker? And you're like, oh, please God, somebody ask me a question. And they're like running frantically trying to find someone who'll ask a question. And then nobody knows it's over. So if they're videoing that, you just walk off stage like a bit of a banana because they don't know whether to give you a round of applause or not. It could be finished. It might not be finished. But when you take the few questions, you say, I'm going to make my conclusion. And at the end, you just say, thank you. They're all very clear that it's over. So you get that round of applause that you hopefully deserve for sharing your great story with them.
When you were on your book tour, I mean, do you ever get bored with your own story? I mean, I assume you're like telling your sort of origin story over and over a bunch of different times.
Yes and no. So I would never be rigid within the content I'm delivering. And I would say create a rigid structure that allows you to be very impromptu. So I think it was Steven Spielberg said that somewhere, and somebody else about creating music, that you always wanted to have a very rigid structure. So you know that core structure of where you're going to go and the key things you need to say, but how you quite get there always leaves a room for a lot of flexibility and a lot of impromptu stuff. So no, every single talk I will ever give usually is quite different in places where just mad things come to my head, and I know the timing pretty well, and I know I'm not going to go blank, and I know I'm going to get back onto the actual structure I have, so it all still makes sense. So it allows me to go off in tangents and have a bit of fun with things. And I tend to keep a list on my phone, as nearly all comedians and kind of creative performers will, of like just call it funny story file. And every time you see something funny ever or remember something funny ever, just add it to the list in bullet point fashion. And that way it keeps it a bit fresher in mind, so that if something comes up, you can go off on a bit of a tangent, and you usually are more likely to have a story off the top of your head than somebody who's just trying to remember it. Like if you say to someone, tell me a funny story now, you're like, oh my God, leave me alone. I can't think of anything. But if you actually start logging these and writing them down, it's pretty helpful. Plus, it's a lot more enjoyable than reading. A lot of people keep diaries, and you read back a diary and you're like, oh, I was very emotional last Tuesday. I ate cake. I have no friends. I hate life. And you're like, that's not going to give you much happiness if you read it back again. But imagine you had a list of all the funniest things that ever happened to you in your whole life on your phone. That's quite good reading if you ever need to dip into some creative content, or you just want to make yourself smile. Because you do forget them if you don't log them. Comedians always log them, and that way they have a huge advantage over the average person when it comes to content creation.
I imagine part of this skill is also, well, I was thinking about this before our talk. Like, there's some days where there's just more funny stuff going on, and other days that's not as funny. And then like, oh, it's actually me. I'm the difference, or either I'm more amused by the world today, or I'm less. And I feel like being able to pick out things that are funny, if you're keeping a list, it might predispose you to just think the world is funnier or...
You do, because you're always looking for it. You're like, what did that lunatic just say? I need to write that down word for word. And everywhere I go, I hear something or see. Even just the smallest thing is really funny to a business audience. I went on a mountain bike trip the other day, talking about a lot of mountain biking all of a sudden. But I went to go, as we were getting ready to go downhill, the guy, he was leading this mountain biking trip. He was like, has everybody been mountain biking here before? Like, it was a pretty severe drop we were going down. And this lady's like, no, but I do a lot of soul cycle. And I was like, that is not quite the same unless somebody's turning off the lights on you and throwing rocks at you while your techno music is playing. Like, you might find this a little bit different. But she was 100% confident in the fact that soul cycle would prepare for mountain biking. Which I thought was gas. It wasn't hilarious, but it just brings a smile to your face. And they're the little moments that you can turn into any business talk, like any business lesson. So, like, what's the lesson in her approach to that? She's assuming everything is the same. Is she underprepared? She might be. What's the lesson in life? Well, if you're not properly prepared for what you're going to do and you don't have full comprehension of what you're getting yourself into, it can go horribly wrong. I noticed it the other day, and then you have your opportunity to tell your little story, and it's very clear that it's connected to your topic.
Do you do a lot of analyzing your own footage and sort of debriefing from the various talks that you give?
Yeah, it sucks. I don't do it in the world of business talks anymore, but I do it for comedy all the time because it's much shorter form. So with comedy, nearly every comedian you'll watch, if they're very good, they tend to listen back nearly that exact same night to everything they've done. They might not video record everything because it's a bit more cumbersome to do that. They're kind of confident in their body language behavior for the most part, or they don't care about it that much. They do for the first couple of times, but usually they're not studying their body movements that much after that. They're studying the words. So they nearly always, and I do this pretty much always, actually every time I've ever been on stage, I record it on a smartphone. And if I'm worried about it in any way, or I'm working on something that I might have said, or I just want to see what worked and what didn't, whether to give my own self peace of mind or to improve it, I will listen back to it, which is horrible to do. And everyone's like, I don't want to listen back to myself. But once you've done it 2 or 3 times, it feels pretty normal. It encourages you to speak for shorter periods of time because you're very unlikely to listen back to yourself giving an hour-long keynote. To be honest, you shouldn't be giving hour-long talks if you can avoid it. Like, the maximum human attention span is 9 minutes and 59 seconds, and it only goes downhill after that. So if some organizer, for them, it's often easier to book you in a period of an hour because it just ticks their boxes. They're just trying to fill slots. But it's much better for you to say, well, how about I do 20 minutes and we'll make the rest of it very interactive with a Q&A. And then if you go short, nobody cares. They care beforehand, but on the day when everybody else runs long and runs over and goes over their time, very few people go short. Nearly everybody goes long. No one will ever come up to you in life, no matter how good you are at speaking. Nobody will ever come up to you and say, oh my God, that was amazing, I just wish it was longer.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to hear it.
Yeah, so we have a weekly networking and speaking. There's all kinds of workshops here, and sometimes I give a talk, and you get an hour, and that's, I can clearly see, I'm always planning like, okay, got to fill 55 minutes. But so I should be thinking a little bit differently. Like, yes, I want to give programming for 55 minutes, but I only want to be sort of telling something for 9 minutes at a time.
Yeah, if you can do it, or rehook them at 9 or 10 minutes. And I would say, like, there's a reason TED Talks used to be 18 minutes because it was about the average length of a lunch break from work, and they wanted people to watch them on a coffee break. And now they've realized, actually, no, we need them to be shorter. So the average length you'll see is continuously dropping. They know it, and it's around that attention span. So under 10 minutes is very common these days, and I think it will be even more common going forward. So I would use that. They're not doing that for no reason. A lot of it comes from the book Brain Rules by John Medina, who is a guy who wrote quite extensively about that. So yeah, always go short as opposed to long. If you have to fill an hour of programming, do a lot of it with an interactive exercise after your talk or Q&A, and go short before you ever go long. And the easiest way to do that on your own content, because it can be hard sometimes to self-edit, is to listen to it or write it out and score all the key sections from 1 to 5. Score everything from 1 to 5. And if people love it, people ask you about it, people laugh at it, it's essential that it has to be in there. Give it a 5 or a 4 and give everything else a 1 or a 2 or a 3. And then when you have to cut, just try and do a talk that's all 3, 4, and 5, or 4 and 5. and it only gets better. But it's very hard to self-edit that. Nearly everybody will go long instead of going short. Really good speakers can give a great talk in 5 minutes, no problem.
What do you think about, obviously this podcast interview is a long form interview, and some, like Tim Ferriss's shows are multiple hours, but I still sit and listen through all of them. How does that fit in with this science of attention span?
Yeah, it's funny. So people tend... I was listening to someone talk about this very thing the other day, where podcasts tend to be the exception to the rule on this. And when people get into the long form content, which is really just you listening in on the discussion, it's a bit different because it's not planned. It's not one person talking. The conversation can go any direction. It keeps your attention. You usually like the people involved, or at least one of them. And it tends to be the exception to the rule of public speaking. But, they can turn off at any moment. They're not trapped there in a room. When you're trapped there in a room with someone, it's quite different. Like Castro used to keep people listening to him for about 4 hours, but they did so at gunpoint down in Cuba down to days. It's very hard to keep people set and steady. They have a phone, they can turn it off at any moment. It's not interactive in any way, whereas podcasts tend to feel a little bit interactive, even though they aren't. So it just feels like you're part of a conversation. You're just being kind of weird and listening in without actually asking something. But yeah, I think it's the exception to the rule. And I wouldn't class it as public speaking because you're usually just chatting away.
Right, okay, gotcha. When you do a talk for a CEO, do you also help them with the delivery, or do you just sort of send them back the words?
So yeah, we tried to set it up in a way that goes with my kind of lifestyle, which is a bit like yours, traveling around the world and be location independent and try and not have meetings in any way. And we realized quickly that CEOs do not want meetings. So traditionally, they have a communications team that says, hey, you need to work on this. And they're like, I know, but leave me alone. And I said, no, really, you need to work on this. And finally, they give into it. And then obviously, they want to try and impress the CEO. So they hire someone for a stupid amount of money in the world of public speaking. And that person tries to justify the fee by having as many meetings as possible and giving FaceTime and like talking the CEO through it. But the CEO usually doesn't have enough time, doesn't want meetings, does not want to see this person in the first place. They just want to say, what should I do differently? Tell me. So we actually set up the whole business. So we just get video of them delivering on a live audience. We transcribe it and we turn it into a script. And then we have a whole team of writers work on that script and give it back to them with a couple of delivery notes where we have the video, but usually it's very little. Usually it's unless they're doing something very strange and distracting. So in the past, if we've had someone glue their pockets on their jeans together before, because that was like their default, just to close off the pockets on the day so they couldn't put their hands in there, but just any little hack that'll stop them doing something. But usually I'd say it's about 10% of overall what we're doing. They just want to know, oh, I said that wrong, can I say it better? Oh, that's a good funny line, perfect. And if we can bake funny bits into the slides, even better. I think it's a huge advantage business speakers have over stand-up comedians, that you can show funny instead of just telling people about funny, as long as you set it up correctly. And by the way, it's a good website I use a lot that might be helpful to people, that anyone who doesn't like listening back to the sound of their own voice, like me, but like nearly everyone in the world, you can use a website called Trint, Trint, and it's pretty cheap, and you can just get all your words transcribed, and that way you're working off a script instead of listening to your own voice. So it's one way of eliminating the having to listen to yourself if you really hate doing it, but you still want to review how it went. Because the words don't lie. You just see them there in front of you and you're like, oh, I said but and I'm excited 29 times. They probably didn't believe I was excited by the 28th time I said I'm excited. In the script, it's very hard to ignore your own words.
And so, okay, we've talked about placing the words at the end of the sentence, the funny word. We've talked about starting wide, a generic statement. We've talked about making the list of stories. What are some of the other important elements from comedy that we can start bringing in?
Yeah, and I think the most used one and the most powerful and the most easy to replicate is just recognizing that the rule of three is central to everything comedy in the content that you craft. So the smallest number of elements your mind can recognize as a pattern is always three. Comedy lives off breaking a pattern. So therefore, the shortest, quickest laugh you can ever get is by taking three elements and changing the last one. It has to be the last one, remember, because we want to facilitate that laugh at the end. So you end up looking like a banana if you mess up the structure in any way. So it's very much apples, apples, oranges, or 1, 2, 4. So the funny element has to be the last one. It can be longer than 3. You could do normal, 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 and then you break the sequence. But you just have to break the sequence at the end. So if you say anything, if I'm like, I met a girl last night and she was a cross between Tandy Newton, Jennifer Lopez, and a Ferrari, it just emphasizes the ending a little different. It's not wildly hilarious in any way, shape, or form, or hilarity, I should say. It just grabs your attention a little bit more. And when you look at humor, it's always 1, 2, 4. So when I say it's 1, 2, 4, I mean, you can see retrospectively I was multiplying the numbers. It's still a logical sequence. It still makes sense, but I'm one step ahead of you and your brain only catches up retrospectively. So if I say 1, 2, you expect 3, I say 4, it all makes sense, but you can only see what I'm doing afterwards. That's pretty much the cusp of comedy. And if you mess that up in any way, it just seems weird. It's like when President Obama came out, he was talking about in a speech the difference between taxation on fish. And he's like, it's really weird because we have one department that looks after them when they're in fresh water and another department that looks after them when they're in salt water. It even gets more complicated once they're smoked. Right, and that's not wildly exciting, but compared to what was going on in Congress that day, that pretty much grabbed everybody's attention. And that particular example, when NPR surveyed people afterwards, they only remembered 2 words more than most: smoked and salmon. So he's very much freshwater, 1, saltwater, 2, smoked, 4. It breaks a pattern. That little pattern flip grabs your mind's attention, and it's not what you were expecting, so you think it's funny, even though when I say it, just between you and me chatting, it doesn't seem like exactly hilarity. Yeah. Comedy is always 1, 2, 4.
Okay, so let's say we want to work that 1, 2, 4 into just a normal part of our talk.
Well, a normal part of your day. Put it this way, I had a sales call with someone from Salesforce the other day, and we have a mutual friend in common, and that friend is always throwing parties where everyone has to dress up as an elf. It's a little bit weird. Irish people are not big on dressing up as elves or costume parties in any way. So I said, well, listen, we'll follow up next week. I'll give you a call on Tuesday, or worst case scenario, I'll see you out and about dressed like an elf. So in that statement, there's 2 things happening. There's 2 comedic techniques being unleashed. One is the rule of 3, and the other is a callback, which is a reference to a moment between a group of people or 2 people that already got a laugh. So we already thought the elf stuff was ridiculous and kind of funny, and it was unusual. That was the soft-hearted parts of the conversation. So when I now close that call, I give them 1, 2, 4, normal. I'll call you next week. We'll set an agenda, or we'll follow up by email, or worst case, I'll see you out and about dressed like an elf. That third part becomes funny because it's a shared moment between the 2 people, and it is even a little bit funnier in that context because they didn't see it coming because of the 1, 2 that preceded the 3. So it's funny, if I say, like, having an Irish accent, like I'm from Ireland, you'd think it would be great calling customer service lines in America. And not really, because obviously every time you do, they're like, thank you for calling Bank of America. For English, press 1. Para español, marca 2. If you're Irish, just send us an email. So you'll see that 1 and 2 follow a sequence, normal, and then the last one is a little bit playful, and that's the one you have to be playful with. It always has to be at the end. Again, not viral hilarity, but it will make a live audience of people sitting in a room laugh every single time to some extent, just because it breaks that pattern. So it takes a little of explaining, but once you start looking for it, you're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm thinking is the tricky part is just like going out and trying to do this. It seems kind of hard to just work in on the fly in a normal conversation.
Funny, your mind looks for it anyway. Do you ever find yourself saying, well, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and etc.? So a lot of the time your mind actually completes that third element easy. Why would anybody say you could have blue or green, etc.? It doesn't make sense. Give me the last element in that sequence. But we naturally are always trying to put things together in sequences of 3. So NPR to TED Talks themselves to UPS, NBC, nearly every company you're surrounded with, to 3 Little Pigs, 3 Amigos, 3 Blind Mice, every cartoon you've ever been subject to, everything as a kid, it always had 3 elements in it. So your mind is already making those patterns. You just have to consciously try and break those patterns. So if I have a funny thing, rather than just give you the funny thing, I'll try and find 2 normal things to set up the funny thing, knowing that I have the twist already.
Okay, so you pull from your list of funny things that have happened to you, and
Exactly.
then you find some similar normal things to
Exactly.
lead up to that. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and that heightens the tension and the misdirect, and it creates an element of something that you're releasing. So you are actively breaking a pattern. So there's a great example of this. There's a guy called Mark Pollock, who in Ireland is a big fundraising advocate for people with disabilities and spinal cord injuries, particularly. And he fell, as far as I know, off a beam and shattered his spinal cord. And then he actually suffered another disease that caused him to go blind. And he has a TED Talk, and he literally wheels out in his wheelchair to start a TED Talk. And all your mind is going, as someone watching that, is like, whoa. Like, I think he's in a wheelchair. I think something happened. He might be blind as well. Oh my God. You usually cannot relate to that. You might know someone who went blind. You might know someone with a spinal cord injury. It's usually beyond the realm of your experience to know someone who does both things. So whatever he's going to say in your mind, even though it's hugely impactful, might not be that relatable. And he knows that, and he knows there's an avid tension in the room. So when he wheels out into that stage, and I think I could be wrong, but from memory, his opening words are, "Ladies and gentlemen, I've got problems." He's like, "I'm paralyzed, I'm blind, I'm bald, and I'm from Northern Ireland." Right? So you have that misdirect. He didn't use the sequence of 3, he used the sequence of 4, but the key funny bit, Northern Ireland, is the fourth one. That's the misdirect. It's at the end. Everybody laughs. And then he says, "I've got problems. There's no doubt about that. But I think you have too. I believe you probably do too." And in that line, he's taken something that's not relatable to you and made it relatable to you and made you laugh within the first 20 seconds. So there's some hugely powerful comedic techniques going on there where they want to hit everyone in the room. They want to make it relatable to everybody, no matter how unrelatable it seems. And they're going to release some tension by putting elements together and breaking the last one with a bit of funny. So he could have done it faster by 3. He did a little bit by saying I'm bald, but he was bald. So you're like, I don't want to laugh at a blind bald guy in a wheelchair. That'd be a bit evil. So you might not laugh at that point, but you will laugh at the Northern Ireland because that seems okay.
It seems like something that you would just have to train your mind to start thinking in these patterns.
Yeah. Watch a comedy special and just try and write down every time you see it. You're like, say, record every time you see a pattern of 3 being broken, and when you laugh, and you'll realize that's probably at least 60% of the jokes in the special. If not more. Because they know it. Once they get the bit of funny, they got to set it up for maximum impact, and breaking the tension is a great way of doing that. And creating some tension is what the first couple of elements do. They misdirect you quite intentionally.
It's really interesting. I did some improv in college, and I feel like that's a sort of type of comedy where you're just responding to what's already been said. It's sort of a different type of comedy to, a sequence that you've planned that you're going to break. Do you have a sense for if improv is as valuable as sort of the stand-up elements when you're giving a talk?
Yeah, improv gets you very comfortable in front of a group of people, but it gets you comfortable being in front of a group of people with other people who are supporting you, whereas the public speaking, especially in business land, tends to be just you on stage. So it can be quite a different dynamic. So I think that although the similarities there, I think stand-up is a much better preparation ground for public speaking if you're crazy enough to give it a try. And worst case, if you don't go for stand-up, I would go for storytelling, like live storytelling, where there's no expectation for you to be funny. Like if you look up some of AJ Jacobs' TED Talks online, he's a phenomenal TED main stage speaker, but you can see him at the Moth storytelling event, which is a live storytelling event, true stories told without notes. And you'll see him doing the exact same element that he did a few weeks later in the TED Talk. So a lot of people are literally practicing in grounds they think are most similar. So improv is good, but you solo in front of a live audience is better.
Mm-hmm. Do you in particular have any further speaking goals? Is there anything that like you would do to try to push yourself to become a better speaker now that you're so experienced?
Yeah, no, like I still hate public speaking, so I do steer away from it. I have it set up on my website these days, but you kind of have to jump through a few hoops to find a page about me speaking, just because enough people were asking about it that I was like, I found myself answering the same questions all the time. So I did set it up, but it was more not like, please book me for your event. It was more like, well, if you're going to pay me enough money, I'll probably do it. But I still do not enjoy it in any way, but I know it's going to go well. So that's the big mental difference. A lot of the worry where I would have been up all night going, how bad is this going to go? I really hate public speaking. To this day, I still hate it. And the nerves are still there and I'm still sweating out my clothes like a lunatic and like the heartbeat is still racing. But the difference is I know it's going to go well. I just don't know exactly how well it's going to go. But like if I was going to score it in advance, I know it's going to be a 6 or a 7 as an 8. And then it's really, do I want to make it better than that? But and knowing that something is going to go pretty well makes a big difference for the most part, or knowing that you've been in the situation enough that you can control more elements than you think. Like the longer you do speaking, you realize I can actually control a lot by changing the layout of the room and changing the time I talk and putting it in my contract that they're not allowed to serve food or have an open bar while I'm on stage. Like all those things have a huge impact on your experience. Like you walk in and they have the table set up in a way where they're all around round tables looking at each other and not you, and they're going to serve a lunch. Like you're already going down for the most part. And you might not have enough experience to realize, actually, that went really bad because it was really bright. It was early in the morning. They all had Wi-Fi access in there. They were all sitting in a way where they faced each other and not me. And they were eating their food and they were really hungry. And they'd had 6 other speakers before them. And they were like, I've had enough of this day. I don't want to be here. And the room was really stinking hot and everybody was yawning. Some situations you can't do a lot about, and it's only experiences that teaches you that. Whereas a lot of the time I'll go into a company and I'll change. The minute I get there, I turn up 45 minutes early and I start moving around the chairs. And if there's a big gap in the middle, I try and fill it in because I know they're going to laugh more if I have people tightly packed. And I know if I set up the chairs in a certain way that they can't get out to go to the bathroom in the middle of it, like that they're more likely to wait. And I'm going to keep it short so they're not going to have to wait that long anyway. And then if I know if I have books as part of the talk, that if I convince the organizers to buy a certain amount of books as part of the talk, I know that people are going to attend that talk. And you limit it. You say, hey, only the first 50 people who come to this are going to get free copies of the book. Then there'll be a lineup as you register people at the door for the event, so it looks super popular. And then you put the books up the front near you, so everybody comes to talk to you at the end. And then you don't give those books out until your talk is finished. And then you're not distracting people by giving them a copy of your work, which they're just reading because they're not listening to you anymore. All those elements have an impact on you. And sadly, it's only experiences that teaches you to go, I shouldn't have done that because that's why it went badly. It wasn't me.
Gosh, I feel like there's plenty more that I could ask you about, but we've got a World Cup game too.
We've got a World Cup game to catch. Thankfully, Ireland are not turning up in the World Cup anytime soon. So
yeah, both our countries failed to make it this time. But let's end with I don't know if there's anything else that you think is important to mention before we go that we haven't talked about already.
Yeah, I've written a ton around this and it's all available for free and you can get all the tips I have. So if you don't want to read a book about this, if you ask me, how do I want to spend my free time? Do I want to read a book on public speaking? I'd say, hell no, that would be down the long list because trust me, I've read them all. So if you just want to get the tips I have them on a site, 7comedyhabits.com, and you can find it all on there. But usually just do the things we mentioned and it will go better than it was before. Just incorporate that rule of 3, use some funny visual content, use other people's video content, set it up generic and wide at the start so it's not all about you. Have somebody tell people about you so you don't have to list your own achievements. Don't be promotional with the stuff you have. Try and sneak it in there. Don't finish on a Q&A. Those tend to make a big difference and get in some sneaky stories and take the time to figure out how to write it so that the funny word is last and how to set it up. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I look much better of a speaker than I did. And I didn't change a whole lot. But those things combined are enough to make you look better than 90% of the speakers out there.
Brilliant. And you mentioned that one website. Is there another place that people can find you online, or the best place to?
Yeah, davidnihill.com. So just my own name, and there's a link to the blog on there, and everything I mentioned is pretty much there. And if they want to dive into it a bit much more, I've left a fairly decent trail of content there they can get stuck into.
Perfect. David, thank you so much for coming on the show. Very entertaining and very useful for myself and our audience. So really,
thank you very much. I just realized I'm a rule breaker.
I don't even know where that question came from at the beginning, but it's a good answer. That's funny.
Yeah, I'm not going to call myself a keynote speaker. It's now going to be just rule breaker at the top of my LinkedIn, and I give credit to you for that one. Thanks very much.
Well, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, David.
Thank you.
All right, another great interview with David Nihill. I think, again, it's really important to remember that this is a trainable skill. This is something you can learn. And I got from this interview that it's not necessarily easy to do. It's going to take some training and practice, but it's one of those things that I think once you get it, once you understand how to inject humor, that it's going to be like riding a bike. It's going to be a natural thing that you can just do the, 1, 2, 4 routine, and you can set up your frameworks to be funny, and it'll just become second nature to you. And once you put in the initial effort to learn about humor and of course about storytelling, then it's always going to be a part of your communication, which is going to give you a huge advantage. And please send David a tweet or an email and thank him for coming on the show and sharing this information. Let me know what your main takeaways are. You can email or tweet at me or Instagram. And this is a great way to know which episodes you guys are liking, what you're learning from the episodes, because this is about partly this is great entertainment, but partly we want you guys to be taking what you learn and applying it to your lives, because that's why I try to bring on guests that can help us with these specific things, is so that you guys can actually go and take advantage of the guest's expertise. All right, that's all for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.